Hello and welcome to Beyond the Game. As always, I try to keep the reviews as honest as possible, and today we go back generations into the 16-bit era. It's time for the Fox and Forest review. As always, graphics are up first. Fox and Forest immediately gives you a nostalgic feel because of its 16-bit graphics. Your character looks pretty good and you can tell immediately that you play as a fox. His animations such as running and jumping look good, and his moving tail makes for a complete character. Your main weapon, the bow, looks pretty well with arrows flying around in all directions. His other skill moves like using his knife or jump attacks all have a certain simplicity over them, but that just fits with the graphics. The environments are varied, more so like games such as Sonic or Mario for instance. Every level you get something completely new. Combine this with the ability to change the season while playing and you get something that really looks good. The levels themselves go from forest environments to graveyards to even snowy environments, and they are all well thought of. The background for each level are well animated and they never get in the way for being too similar to the foreground design. The enemies you encounter are decent. They have a wide variation of flying enemies and ground enemies, but even though they look nice, they are less animated than your own character. However, there are tons of different enemies and you have to give them credit for that. In every different level you find completely new enemies with new abilities. Besides the standard enemies, you will also encounter boss battles in the game. The bosses themselves look pretty nice. They are much larger than your character and they do like to fill up a big part of the screen. They have lots of moving animation and colors and they are really nice to look at. The game itself runs smooth. During my playthrough I never had a problem with the frame rate or any other problems. You might expect it to be normal for a 16-bit looking game, but that isn't always the case. And now let's check out the music and sound of Fox and Forest. The music is really well done here with easy to listen tunes. Of course, this isn't the orchestra music what you're used to with new games, but they did replicate the typical sound of the 16-bit era. They of course modernize it a bit more here with more flashy upbeat music, but overall it fits the game and I absolutely have nothing bad to say about the music. The sound of your bow is pretty nice here. Depending on what ammo you use, it can sound normal to a very powerful blast. The simple whoosh of your melee attack are nice, but nothing too special. The sound, however, of hitting your enemies comes straight out of the other classics from the 16-bit era. There are of course many other sounds in the game, from picking up coins to collectibles, and they are what you might expect. The only lesser sound is the sound of jumping. It was pretty typical in the time to have a high-pitched sound whenever you used to jump. However, the developers chose to make the jumping sound very soft. No deal breaker, but it did stand out to me. And now let's talk about the gameplay and story. The story, even though very meager, is actually pretty fun. You play as a fox named Rick that finds himself one day very hungry. In the distance he sees a bird and he immediately thinks he found himself some very nice juicy looking food. The bird however spots him and he tells him that he's the hero that they are all waiting for. After a small introduction of what is expected of him, he agrees to help, but of course for a very pricey fee. It's simple and they put in some comedy in the story that even works for a 2D side-scroller. For combat, your character's main weapon is a bow. You can shoot up to 3 arrows in rapid succession before having to wait a second to do so again. However, you can only shoot straight forward, and even worse, you can only do so while standing still. There are plenty of enemies who run at you that make for good target practice. Your other weapon is your lance, or better said your knife. You can use this while jumping to get rid of flying enemies, or do a low attack to kill enemies who are very low to the ground. While playing and killing enemies you gain coins. These coins are very useful in the levels because you have to activate checkpoints with these coins. You see, checkpoints are activated using a certain amount of coins at specific areas. Every checkpoint you want to activate in the level requires more and more coins. It's a fun trade-off. Do you spend 40 coins on a checkpoint, or do you skip this one and see if you can get to the next one and save yourself some coins? It's a fun thought that rewards confident players. Coins are also used to buy new skills, upgrades and potions in the central hub area. The main gimmick of the game is the ability to change the season while playing. To give you an example, you play in the summertime in the forest. The ability allows you to switch to fall, making leaves disappear from trees so you can now see if there are hidden areas. In fall, mushrooms have sprouted from the ground that you now can jump on, making earlier inaccessible locations now accessible. It is a thing that you will use a lot of times, and it will both help you in combat and to solve puzzles. The world map itself is divided into small sections, and each section has a total of 2 different stages, and a third stage is a boss fight. After beating a boss fight, you gain a new item that you can use then in previous areas. However, I must say that the boss fights are rather easy and they could have used a little bit more challenge. And now here comes unfortunately the bad part about Fox and Forest. To gain access to new levels you have to collect something they call magical seeds, and these are scattered in the stages. You need a certain amount of them to continue in the game itself. But some of these magical seeds are only accessible with the items you get from bosses. Meaning, after a boss fight you have to replay all the other stages again to hunt those magical seeds. It feels they did this to lengthen the otherwise short game. It becomes very tedious after playing a level for the 10th time, and the levels themselves are long. Forget Sonic stages of 2 minutes. No, these stages are much longer. Fox and Forest brings back the joy of the 16-bit games. Graphically and sound-wise it is pretty good, and the gameplay with its platforming elements are solid enough. The game is short and it ain't too difficult, plus its price point as of now is rather steep. The massive drawback is that you have to replay stages a lot of times to progress, and that just hurts the fun factor. I give this game a 7 out of 10. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that like button. For more videos every week, check out the channel or even subscribe. As always, thanks for watching and see you next time.